On today's show, the Capitals waive Hunter Shepard and they face a lot of tough roster questions before 5 p.m. on Monday.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, including the SiriusXM app and on YouTube. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the last 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And the best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about the news that broke today that Hunter Shepard was waived by the Capitals for the purposes of reassigning him to Hershey. What's the latest with that? I'll talk about that a little bit later. I'll talk about the tough roster decisions for the Capitals to make. The biggest question is that third line left wing. Who is going to get the job? What's the latest? And what are my thoughts on it? I'll talk about that. And then in the final segment, there's actually hockey that was played this past weekend as the Caps down the Bruins. But just to get it going here, talking about that news that broke this Sunday afternoon is that the Capitals waived Hunter Shepard in hopes of reassigning him to the Hershey Bears so he can join the Hershey Bears. And, you know, the tough question or the tough thing that I noticed about it is that if you take a look at the AHL standings, I already knew this, but do yourself a favor and do it, is that Hunter Shepard was ranked the number 1 netminder in all of the AHL in the regular season. Is there the chance that someone could come and scoop him up? Yeah, I think there is at least a decent chance, as we know that there are some netminders out there that have already been injured, or another team that's looking for some depth. So it's kind of unfortunate that you take a look at Hunter Shepard. I always had high hopes for him that he could have just been on to the next one because he hit the waiver wire. I guess we will find out soon if that is the case. But a tough thing for him and tough decisions for the Capitals to make these roster cuts as they have to be compliant by 5 p.m. Eastern on Monday. The Capitals have made a significant move by placing goaltender Hunter Shepard on waivers, signaling their intention to assign him to the AHL Hershey Bears if he clears. With this decision, the team's roster now stands at 27 skaters, although only 25 are currently fit to play due to the impending long-term injured reserve status for Nick Backstrom and TJ Oshie. The team has a little over 24 hours left before the final opening night roster cuts must be submitted to the NHL. And it's a tough thing taking a look at this as they have to be turned in by 5 p.m. on Eastern time, that is tomorrow. So if you take a look at it, I think that most of the questions about the roster have been answered. The big question looming is that third line left wing. Who ultimately is going to get it? It does appear that Sonny Milano is going to be on the team. So I'll talk about that a little bit more in the next segment, but that was the biggest news for me today was Hunter Shepard. And you take a look at it, it's an interesting position for the Capitals to be in the regard that they have Charlie Lindgren and they have Logan Thompson, both really great netminders. I think they will knock it out of the park for the Capitals, but both netminders entering into contract years. And it's kind of my hunch and my belief that only one of those netminders will get an extension. As you know, how they play this year, I think that the Capitals probably wouldn't be able to afford both of them and sign them both to an extension, even if they wanted to. And then you take a look at Hunter Shepard, who for the longest time was the belief was the number 3 netminder in the Capitals organization, also entering into a contract year and also on the waiver wire. So you take a look at the Capitals netminding as it stands right now, and it seems pretty laid out. Yeah, we know it's going to be Charlie Lindgren and it's going to be Logan Thompson, but things could change in a hurry within the next year or so here. I think that, it could be Logan Thompson or Charlie Lindgren. I guess something crazier could happen, and both of those netminders could walk. I don't ultimately think that that is going to be the case, but and when you factor in Hunter Shepard as well being a guy that's in his contract season coming up here and also hitting the waiver wire, well, then I think that kind of bumps up Clay Stevenson, who I've always talked about is probably going to be the long-term answer in net for the Capitals. Why? He moves a lot better. He's bigger. He's younger. He checks all the boxes that the Capitals are looking for. So, even when you take a look at it now, Charlie Lindgren and Logan Thompson, it seems like that is going to be the answer for years. And it might be with one of those netminders for years. But like I talked about, I think that one of them will move on to the next one. Now, it's really kind of hard to say which netminder is going to get that extension. I think that, kind of the knee-jerk reaction is to say Charlie Lindgren, considering how great he played last season. I mean, let's be honest here, Capitals fans, the Caps would not have made it to the playoffs last year had it not been for Charlie Lindgren. Darcy Kemper wasn't up to the task, and ultimately it was Charlie Lindgren that had to take over the reins of the net and did it. So he plays a huge role. So I think that's when I say the knee-jerk reaction is that it's going to be Charlie Lindgren that's going to get that extension. And then you take a look at Logan Thompson. What has he been for the Capitals in this short time in the preseason? Lights out. So I don't think that there should be any foredrawn conclusions that it's going to be Charlie or Logan. What I say is let the best man win, and it's going to be tough. I think that the Capitals this season are in a unique position to have 2 grade A netminders. And if you're an everydayer of the show, I talk about that there's a lot of teams around the NHL that don't have one premier netminder out there. I see that the Swayman deal got taken care of this Sunday morning. So the Bruins are in a good position. But as you take a look around the NHL, some of the teams that were good are a lot of question marks. You take a look at the Red Wings now with Campbell going on the NHL's player assistance program. I think that probably changes the outlook for their season, depending on how long he's in that program. So I think to a certain extent, as Capitals fans, we take for granted that it seems like 9 times out of 10, we have really great netminding, have had for as long as I can remember. But things could change here in a hurry. And it could be the future that it could be Charlie Lindgren and Clay Stevenson is the number 2, or Logan Thompson and Clay Stevenson, as I do think the Capitals have to come to terms with Hunter Shepard. If something doesn't happen between now and the time that he either clears waivers or gets picked up by another team, they need to address what they're going to do with him. In my estimation, I know that he is a little bit on the older side as far as talent is concerned, but they need to come to terms with what they're going to do. I think that he has outgrown being an AHL netminder, and if there is no long-term plans for him up on the big team, I think that the Capitals should do the right thing by Hunter Shepard and view him as an asset and trade him at some point so we could get something in return and see what kind of future he can have with another NHL team. Because if the Caps don't have any long-term plans, I don't think that it's a good idea to keep these guys just kind of percolating down in the AHL, forever. I think they need to come to terms with them. Do they have a spot or not? And if not, then it's Clay Stevenson the next one. But for right now, it's going to be interesting to see if Hunter Shepard actually does clear. And, oftentimes, I had questions about Ethan Bear as well. But like I said, look it up on AHL.com. Hunter Shepard was ranked the number 1 netminder during the regular season last year. But, it was close because, who was number 2? Clay Stevenson, and they kind of vacillated back and forth all of last season in the AHL. So one of the things that the Capitals have always been really lucky in, I guess, is having really great netminders, and it does appear that they're set up in a really great position for years to come. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about tough roster decisions. Make no mistake about it, these are not going to be easy questions to answer. The biggest question is that third line left wing. What will happen there? I'll discuss straight ahead. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. So if you are involved in HR, if you are involved in the hiring and firing, then you need Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about it on the Locked On Capitals podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure and join the Locked On Capitals Insiders new for this season. There will be exclusive content like video content, short form podcast, insider information. Check it all out in the show description. All right, in this next segment here, we are going to talk about those tough roster decisions. And what is the most intriguing storyline, and I'll go into it in depth here, is Andrew Cristall. Is he going to make the team? And if he makes the team, are they going to, let him play just the 9 games and then send him to the Kelowna Rockets? Or are they going to push all their chips in and have him on the big team all year? If like I talked about in a podcast, I want to say it was last week or the week before, it was my belief that Vrana is going to be the guy to get the job. And you take a look at it, the Cristall will go to the Kelowna Rockets, Miroshnichenko will go to the Hershey Bears. It's still my belief right now, and I'll tell you why. If you take a look at Andrew Cristall, are they going to burn a spot on the roster for a guy that's only going to play 9 games? Are they going to cut ties with Jacob Vrana so that Andrew Cristall can play 9 games and then go to the Kelowna Rockets? That is kind of my hunch right now, just based on how the chessboard is laid out in front of me and the moves that I've seen made thus far. The biggest thing to consider is that Sonny Milano is still on this team. So that answered one of the big questions that I asked last week. It's going to be interesting to see how this shakes out. Now, to be fair, there are still other possibilities that could take place, like a trade. I think that's an outside possibility, but make sure and keep it to Locked On Capitals, as I will have you guys covered the entire way. Talking about the roster deadline and composition, the deadline for submitting the opening night roster is Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern. As of now, the roster still includes 3 extra forwards and 2 extra defensemen. Forwards Andrew Cristall, Jacob Vrana, and even Miroshnichenko, along with defensemen Dylan McIlrath and Alex Alexiev, are all in DC ahead of the Monday deadline. It was only Hunter Shepard that was put on the waiver wire. Could something still happen between now and then? Sure, but it seems like it's trending in that direction. Talking about those tough roster decisions, it seems both McIlrath and Alexiev have secured spots on the opening night roster. That changes things. I didn't think that there was going to be 2 defensemen for Washington, D.C., as they did not go on waivers. Consequently, the team will start this season with 8 defensemen with 1 extra forward spot available. That is the big thing that I want you all to circle. It's 1 extra forward spot available. So let's take a look at that. Sonny Milano is going to be that third line left wing. It does appear. Are they going to have Andrew Cristall be a guy that is going to be a healthy scratch 9 times out of 10? Or could there be an outside possibility that Sonny Milano is the extra skater and they have bigger plans for Andrew Cristall? I guess it remains to be seen. It seems like the easiest decision or the easiest conclusion for me to draw is just what I've said before, that they're going to have Cristall either play 9 games, but that would kind of screw it up. That I think it would make the most sense to have Jacob Vrana be that extra skater. I just think that makes sense. And, this is just kind of my reaction right now as I record this at 9:58 Eastern, is that's how I see the whole chess match laid out here. There's still pieces that are moving, and I don't ultimately know what the Capitals have up their sleeves. That's just my hunch. It'll be an interesting storyline to watch. That is for sure. Head coach Spencer Carberry praised Cristall's performance in the preseason, suggesting the possibility of him staying with the team until the final roster decisions are made. Cristall is not eligible, as we know, to play in the AHL. A 9-game trial in the NHL seems like a logical next step. Does it, however? I guess you could look at it that it could be Cristall playing 9 games and they'll just call up a guy from Hershey. You could always call up Miro, something of that nature. So I guess there are, a lot of scenarios that could play out. It just seems to me that, Vrana had a pretty good camp. I wouldn't say that he knocked it out of the park, but he did a pretty good job. And if you take a look at Cristall, 19 years old, are the Capitals willing to go all in, or do they just want to see 9 more games with him on the big team? What's talking about here next is potential signings and player assignments. There's a chance the Caps may sign 2018 Stanley Cup champion Vrana to a contract after his PTO, but they would have to wait a couple days to do so. Miro does not require waivers, so he can be returned to Hershey, which seems to be a likely scenario. And, I'm not here to say that Miro didn't have a good camp. I just don't think that he popped off the page as much as Cristall in a lot of ways that Vrana did. So I think that's the position that he's in. I also think there's the possibility that he could get a call-up at some point if called upon. Talking about practice and final roster deadline, the Capitals are set to practice on Monday at Capital One Arena before the final rosters are due later in the afternoon. So let's drill down a little bit more in depth on the players that we're talking about. Let's first talk about Jacob Vrana. The 28-year-old winger is currently at camp on a PTO, meaning he doesn't have a guaranteed contract for the upcoming season. Throughout preseason games, Vrana showcased his exceptional skills, leading in shots, individual shot attempts, and scoring chances among the team's forwards. It's a pretty good check mark. His speed and ability to create offensive opportunities stood out to Coach Carberry, significantly boosting the team's performance when he was on the ice. Seems kind of tailor-made for that extra skater or a guy that's going to step in if there's an injury or if someone's underperforming. That's why I still think Jacob Vrana could be that guy. The next guy I'm going to talk about is still kind of on the outside looking in my estimation, is Ivan Miroshnichenko, a 20-year-old Russian player on his entry-level contract. Had a quieter preseason and received feedback from Coach Carberry regarding his decision-making on ice. Despite his solid performance, it's likely that Miro will be sent to Hershey to further develop his playing style. And that's just kind of what I noticed. I don't think that there were any glaring gaffes or anything that he made an error. I just don't think that he popped off the page as much as Vrana and Cristall. And Cristall is, like I say, the most intriguing name out there. Cristall emerged as one of the top scorers for the team during the preseason, but his spot on the final roster is uncertain due to salary cap limitations. The team must manage the roster to stay under the salary cap, which may involve temporary moves to accommodate injured players. Looking ahead, the Caps can expect faces and challenges to task of making necessary moves to ensure the team's financial compliance before the upcoming home opener. While the game roster for the home opener may see changes, this is the likely roster the Capitals will submit to the NHL on Monday. So a lot of questions abound for the Capitals, and I think that a lot of questions were already answered. Again, a bit surprised that they decided to go with the two defensemen. And it seems like they're only in on the one extra skater on the forward side. So with Milano on the team, with him not getting waived, with him not getting dealt, it does appear to be an interesting storyline. To be honest with you, I thought there was the possibility that the Capitals would waive Sonny Milano. I don't think that he played horribly, but I also don't think that he popped off the page either. It's something we're going to have to follow. And of course, I will have you guys covered the entire way. All right, so it's not just personnel. There was actual hockey played this last weekend, albeit preseason hockey. Let's dig into that straight ahead. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And listen, there is a lot of football that's played on any given Sunday or Monday or Thursday. And some of those games you might be more into, some of them maybe not. Say it's a Commanders game or a Ravens game if you're a fan of either of those teams, and maybe you're really into it. But say it's a Sunday, a Monday or Thursday, and one of those teams aren't playing. Well, there is still vested interest when you have FanDuel. Open up the FanDuel app, put a little bit of money on the game. All of a sudden, all of the games are that much more exciting. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So there was hockey this past weekend, and the Capitals were victorious. And it was primarily veterans that were playing out there for the Capitals, seasoned veterans. Well, that wasn't the case for the Bruins. And while they did have some key pieces in the lineup for Boston, it was primarily younger players. So I don't think it gives maybe necessarily an accurate depiction of how the game would play out. But in any event, the Capitals were victorious. They downed the Bruins 2-0. And players that really popped off the page was Taylor Radish, 5 shots on goal. I think he is going to be huge for the Capitals on that fourth line. Connor McMichael, 4 shots on goal. Matt Roy, 3 shots on goal. And Charlie Lindgren saving 17 of 17 goals from Protas and TVR. So you take a look at it, it was a good game for the Capitals. And to start the game, Boston didn't have any shots on goal for quite some time. We almost made it through the entire first period before the first shot was registered by the Bruins. So the Capitals were definitely dialed in, and it was fun to watch the Capitals play with Carlson and Chikrin and Roy and Sandin and the upper end defensemen that were out there. And I think, just from seeing them all out on the ice at the same time, that Capitals team looked really, really good with that defensive pairings and the forwards for that matter. It was some good hockey to watch, even though at times was a little bit maybe not so interesting. But Andrew Cristall's performance and potential, he was in the game. That was a vote of confidence. In the Capitals' final preseason game against the Bruins, the 19-year-old Cristall delivered an outstanding performance, showcasing his potential. Cristall, we know, who is not eligible for the AHL, has the option of making the NHL roster or joining Kelowna. Despite not getting on the score sheet, Cristall demonstrated his speed. Again, can you believe we're talking about speed? That was one of the biggest knocks against his game, ability to find open space and create scoring opportunities in the game. His hockey IQ is off the charts. He's a great playmaker. He sees the rink very well. If it's not his year, the entire season, I think it would be next season. I think he is ready for truly great things, and I think the Capitals will benefit so much. Talking about special teams performance, the Cap special teams performance was notable. Aliaksei Protas capitalized on an unexpected bounce during an offensive zone faceoff, swiftly seizing the opportunity to score a shorthanded goal, being in the right place at the right time. That is what Aliaksei was. The penalty kill proved successful with notable efforts from Tom Wilson and McMichael, creating chances for the Caps in the opposite direction. However, the power play faced challenges such as excessive passing and tough luck, resulting in an 0 for 3 performance on the man advantage. So, it's preseason hockey. There's stuff that needs to get cleaned up, but all things considered, the Caps walked away with a dub in the final preseason game. Dress rehearsal, if you will, all preparing for the big event Saturday, where the rubber meets the road, playing the New Jersey Devils. And like I talked about, the defense was huge. Pleasantly surprised. It was a great defensive core, great D pairings out there. The defensive pairings effectively limited the Bruins preseason lineup to just 15 shots on goal. That's pretty good. That's shutdown, if you ask me. Roy and Chychrun were standout players on the blue line, each logging over 20 minutes of ice time. Martin Faravari and Matt Roy stood out as solid shutdown pairings, contributing to the Caps' perfect 3 for 3 penalty kill. That's quite an improvement. I like what I'm seeing in goaltending and offensive contributions. Charlie Lindgren was dialed in and played a good game. It's good to see him get a good start in there. As we saw, his previous preseason game was not so good. However, not a true accurate depiction, considering that he was a bit hung out to dry in my estimation. Charlie Lindgren delivered a solid performance against Boston, stopping all shots on goal. Caps team forward lines demonstrated strong cohesion and were successful in directing the puck toward the nets, producing a total of 32 shots on goal. Taylor Radish led the Caps with 5 shots on goal, and Chychrun led the team with 8 total shot attempts. So you take a look at it. I guess what I was talking about is the game was a bit slow at times, but all things considered, I'll take a little bit of a slow game as long as the Capitals walk away with a big win. So those are the big questions. I'm glad the Capitals were able to put a bow on the season with a victory, 2-0 victory, blanking the Bruins, albeit with a rookie-laden Bruins team. The Capitals found a way to pick up a win, but the big question, let's go over them here once more time before the show concludes here, is Hunter Shepard. Does he clear waivers? And what will that mean for the Bears if he doesn't clear? And then that third line left wing, who gets the job? As there is only a spot for one extra skater. Are they going to burn that with Cristall being the extra skater? Or do they think that Milano will be that extra skater? Or would Jakub Vrana be the better option? That's the intriguing storyline for me there. I think that in a lot of ways, Jakub Vrana would be the better option if, let's underline, sometimes people don't want to listen to the whole show and they'll put in comments saying something I didn't say, is if the Capitals don't have any grand plans for Cristall. Now, if the Capitals plan on having Cristall on the big team all season long, then I think that makes it a lot easier of an answer. But if Cristall's on the big team, does that mean that Sonny Milano will be the extra skater? Again, I don't think the Capitals would ever have a scenario where Andrew Cristall's going to be the extra skater and have him up on the big team all season. I don't think that would be the right thought process. I think that would stunt the growth of a young player. But all things considered, it's going to be exciting. Between now and 5 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, a lot of intriguing storylines to follow. Again, keep it locked to Locked On Capitals. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals and making it your first listen of the day. For your second listen, find a Locked On Fantasy Hockey, because a fantasy hockey expert and could get the edge over the league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.